Blow the charge.
Breaching! Breaching!
Go, go, go!
Clear!
Now, once upon a time, titles used to mean something, but those days are gone. Now, simple word association is the main focus, and thus we have the latest third release of Modern Warfare. That trusted reboot, aka where new ideas go to die. A COD title that steps in right on the cusp of next generation launching. The big question of the day though, is this a Ghosts or a Modern Warfare? Well, hopefully, the clue's in the title. Maybe. A large amount of hoo-ha has come already from the engine being rebuilt from scratch. Volumetric lighting as standard, vastly improved PBR materials, temporal reconstruction, and even ray tracing all being fitted into the newest title to push the envelope, which is a mantra of the series, to be honest, alongside that 60 FPS frame rate. I do not know for sure, but I would say a brand new engine may not be 100% accurate, but I'm sure it has had vast swathes of changes, improvements, and entire classes rewritten from scratch. So arguably there's a level you have to draw to say it's a new engine or not. Now the results are obvious, with excellent material quality, lighting precision and image quality standing out from the get-go, which was also evident in previous releases. Mind here you can see Advanced Warfare and Black Ops 3, hardly bad looking titles even now. Now all these additions come at a cost on current generation hardware, and thus we see a dynamic scaling resolution as before, paired with that almost standard now temporal AA and stochastic reconstruction element that I've been talking about since the very beginning of this generation, as it is now becoming the standard, and such is making pixel counting much harder to do, and this title takes the prize so far of the hardest one I've ever had to count. Now here they are using this accumulation method of data to increase the quality and detail over several frames, alongside the stability of those pixels' existence between them. This transient stability is also helped by the temporal resolution increase from that 60Hz refresh. The results come in with a final target output for PS4 of 1920 by 1080, but this looks to be based on a reduced width reconstruction at its lowest point, likely relying on the console's direct access to the colour and geometry sample points via their EQAA hardware, something we have seen and I've covered in previous COD titles. Thus, image quality can change during moment to moment with movement and that dynamic scaling rising and lowering as the load changes. This gives us counts from 1280 by 1080 and then full 1920 by 1080, but I believe that this is only ever or very rarely achieved and mostly done via those accumulation methods. It does always seem to keep a static 1080 on the height though, it just seems to be scaling on the horizontal, the width. Now the massive work on culling geometry helps fix this extra workload into the same frame time by reducing what hits the pixels and vertex shaders. Some of these concessions are evident from shadow map cascade distance, LOD popping and such, but to be fair, 95% of the target audience will either not notice or care, even though it is very aggressive within the frustrum and can easily be seen in play and certainly across the opening section pans. Now this same work is manifested in the Premium Pro version, which seems to bottom out at 1920 by 2160, with counts moving and then topping out via reconstruction at 3840 by 2160. It is obvious though that the Pro is not hitting close to native 4K, even though it is an instant boost in clarity and detail over the base model, which really helps accentuate the absolutely incredible art, material and lighting work in this game. I've said this time and time again over my years on this channel, lighting is everything and will form the focus for next generation alongside animation, which is simply incredible here. As I mentioned on my PS5 prediction video, almost 2 years ago now, expect ray tracing to offer extensive reflections, shadow and GI to bring a real leap over current generation, alongside vastly enriched animations, collision and physics wrapped inside smoother gameplay and sharper visuals. Modern Warfare demonstrates this very well indeed, with the close attention to light's reaction on materials, shadows and surface properties. The balance of specular to diffuse is exquisite here, and like the game or not, they have some of the best lighting and material artists in the business, alongside the uber talented Mikhail Drobot, who gave us some of his most precise and impressive motion blur in Advanced Warfare still of this generation. to the early basis for his huge strides in Temporal AA from Far Cry 4's console-exclusive HRAA, Hybrid Reconstruction AA. It, like all, comes at the expense of perceived sharpness on high-frequency details, but this can be offset via sharpening filters such as AMD's Radeon Image Sharpening, or the old-fashioned way, via your TV's remote control. Above this though, what has really impressed me here and deserves as much praise as everything else is the animation. I am just... oh my god, this is some of the best hand, gun, motion and reload animations I've ever salivated over. Even more impressive is these are likely keyed frames and not motion captured. The careful balance of fluidity, responsiveness and realism are integrated into these sumptuous recoil, cocks to the side, ADS and reloads, yet easily giving Doom 2016 a run for its money. I wonder if this was an inspiration in fact. Either or, the incredible increase here, human actions that carry weight and are served up with a drizzle of sweet, sweet motion blur syrup just make this a mouth-watering appetizer for the full game. Moments of animation lust ahead. Now, the use of screen space reflections in the game, a likely candidate for RTX boosts alongside shadows, embeds the weapons into this and it works well as they reflect light and thus objects within screen space, something the higher resolution on Pro helps to reduce the stippled effect this can have. The net result is clearly the best looking COD title we have seen so far, and it is the composite of all these elements into a silky smooth and twitch based shooter that makes it a clear winner for me on the visual and presentation platform. The quality will be even better and more appreciated during the game's single player campaign, which still follows the bombastic AAA method of impressing you through high octane set pieces and pyrotechnics. And I'm sure those animations, recoils and physics that we see a taster of here in the multiplayer will be ramped up to epic proportions in the final single player, so I'm really looking forward to diving in. Something I'm also looking forward to covering is the RTX ray tracing extras the PC version has come release. Now, one addition to the post effects in multiplayer now is the inclusion of that per object motion blur, which only affects your hands and gun for that CGI look in action, and then a camera based velocity and depth based motion blur. Now, this enhances the motion and is likely a key feature into the AA solution working so well, and it is intricately woven into that post processing pass pipeline. Try and say that fast 5 times. This can be turned off in the menu independently on all versions alongside cross-platform play for the first time, which should only enhance sales and was likely an Activision stipulation, which I'm sure Microsoft welcomed with open arms. Sony were likely less enamoured with this plan to smooth the platform playing levels out. And based on that statement, we reach the final performance metrics section, and probably the most important for everyone watching this video. And really, it's a case of two halves. That additional benefit of the Pro means the PS4 is unsurprisingly, and sometimes it is, but not this time, the worst performing of the two. It can regularly dip down on certain maps. Pine is the worst on both platforms by far, to the low 40s. Now, VSync is engaged, so there's no tearing, which is a great feature, but that does mean that tearing option can be added, which has been evident in previous versions of the COD engine, so they could put that back on and therefore have an adaptive tear at the top. The last couple of milliseconds might help you out. I'm not seeing a huge difference with motion blur on and off. I was playing this mostly with gun motion blur on and world motion blur off, and I found it pretty responsive, but Pine, like I say, can really feel the judder and stutter just moving the camera around, so be aware of that. But again, this is an alpha, so it will improve. Generally though, it holds pretty close to what most COD titles ran at the time, and this is a tail end title and it is a few months from release. I don't even know how old this build is, but I'm assuming a 2v2 map on this small having these kind of dips means the resolution scaling and all the effects that I've just covered may be ramped up much higher, and therefore the scaling more aggressive in some of these bigger maps, but we'll have to wait and see for the final release. But this is a good benchmark for what you can see now and therefore what it looks like on final ship. PS4 Pro is much better. It's more solid. It doesn't dip down as low. High 40s is the lowest point I caught, again on Pine, but it is very short-lived. And the most important thing here is we're not seeing on either console any frame rate exceed the next refresh cycle, that 33 milliseconds. That's key. When you're getting hangs of 50, 60 milliseconds, that's when you really start feeling the pinch on that performance level. So that's the most important part that is consistent here, is they keep within 16 and 33 milliseconds, or really keep it within that 16 milliseconds more often than not. The Pro is the better performing of the two, it's the better looking of the two, and therefore it isn't really a surprise that if you have got both consoles, the Pro is the version I would recommend to play it on. But again, this is an early alpha like I cover every single year. Your mileage may vary depending on the map, your network connection, and all those other caveats that will fall into play. But this is a baseline for what we can expect once I get hands-on with final release, which I'm really looking forward to.
It's down to you.
And that brings another video to a close. I hope you enjoyed it and found it informative. If so, please like, subscribe, and maybe even share where appropriate. Otherwise, you can chat with me over on Twitter, and I'll catch you on the next one.
Give them a proper English welcome.